welcome to the show. I'm Jaco Maritz. Now, when would trustees need to hire or fire an asset manager, and should this be necessary, who takes care of the assets in the switch-over period? To tell us more is Dr. Jaco Maritz. He's the head of the transition management team at Cadiz Securities. Jaco, thanks for coming onto the program.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Now, the switching over has been given an official term, as you were, transition management. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but is it?
Well, I think there's a lot to it. People often think management is simple but not easy. In other words, the concept of moving your assets from a outgoing fund manager, for example, to a new one, it sounds like it should be easy, but actually behind the scenes there's a lot of things happening that one should take care of, and that has given rise over time, over the last decade or so, to the specialist transition management service that we now see in globally and also in South Africa.
So what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, in terms of moving assets, you look at actually going to where the assets are kept. It's normally at the bank. It's not physically moving, everything's electronic these days, but actually making the instruction to the bank to move the assets. We normally then move it to a temporary account called a transition account, where we realign this portfolio, and at the end then it moves across to the new manager or selection of. Then also, that's behind the scenes, and also a bit more obvious are the alignment process. For example, a fund might go out from an equity manager, and actually the trustees have decided now to invest in a bond portfolio. So it's the process of them selling out the equities and buying the bond portfolio and then transferring across. It's a combination of the trading, risk management, cost management, and then behind the scenes all that administration that also goes with that.
So now you talk about all that administration, and if I'm going to play devil's advocate here, I'd like to ask, is this another expensive link in the chain of command that has become the pension funds industry? So you say, oh, well, we need to administer this, and you need certain sort of derivatives experts and traders to administer the process of selling and buying new shares. Is it all really necessary?
It definitely is, but I can put you at ease in the sense that is inherent in the transition management trading process would actually have been incurred anyway. And most often, I would say, in all cases, we manage to do it a lot cheaper than alternative routes that are available. Alternative routes, for example, one could ask the outgoing fund managers to liquidate your portfolio and pay the cash over, and then physically paying the cash over to the new manager. And there's a couple of things wrong with that if you really think about it. For example, what about if you buy the same assets again? So the process of liquidating everything, you incur a very large amount of trading costs, and then you incur it again by buying a new portfolio. We try to streamline this process by recognizing outgoing portfolios and a new portfolio. There could be a large amount of commonality. Why sell those assets and buy them back? Unnecessary expense, and we will save that cost. So the fund could save up to 50, 60, 70% of cost by doing a transition. Instead of just liquidating and doing other alternative routes.
I mean, that is a big cost saving. Jaco, how do you know, or how do you evaluate whether your transition manager has managed to save costs? So how do you actually put this to the trustee and say, right, our transition manager has done this is how he saved your costs?
Well, one can actually before the time calculate what the cost might be, and also what alternative routes might be, what might cost, and then compare before the trustees make the decision to appoint a transition manager, or even which one to appoint. Those costs could be estimated, and obviously afterwards one can then go through a process of calculating really what was the, then justify that it was indeed a cost-saving exercise.
So now, for example, if your transition manager said, I'm going to save you 70% of the costs if you had to do this a traditional way, as you've suggested, liquidating all the assets and buying them afresh, and they don't save you the cost that they've promised, what's your recourse, or is this a situation that comes about?
Look, I think one can always, before the time, know that you're going to save costs by not selling assets and then buying the same assets again. Our books are always open for anyone to look at. So, for example, if a client would afterwards say, but you didn't deliver on your promise of cost saving, we can always open our books to them and say, well, these are the assets we had to buy and sell for your transition. Come and have a look. Come and ascertain yourself that we've done the right thing. And I think this is, in this day and age where we're moving to transparency, this is something that the transition manager should be able to do. And I think also a portfolio manager are also normally able to justify their buying and selling decisions in the same way.
Now, you talk about, I was reading through some notes that you sent to me before this interview, the direct costs involved, but there are also hidden costs.
Yes.
Perhaps you could touch on those.
Yeah, the cost is, it's best to think about an iceberg, as you think in visual terms. An iceberg is a large mass of dangerous ice floating in the sea, and there's only a small tip that's visible from the top, and that's the direct cost. You can calculate the brokerage and the taxes that will be incurred in a transition process before you even start. But what you don't know are what are the other indirect costs that lurks beneath the surface. And there we talk about unmanaged exposure. What do I mean with that? Well, if you are, let's say, moving a pure portfolio into a low-risk, absolute return type portfolio, you're switching between the two. While you are going to have to reduce your equity exposure to align to this absolute return low-risk portfolio. Our aim as transition managers are to track the performance of this new target portfolio as soon as possible. So we would have to reduce the equity exposure in the first phase, let's say on day one after transition. If we don't, and the market has big moves in the market, we are going to underperform the target portfolio, and that's a risk that we don't want to take for the client. So that's one of the hidden costs. Other costs are delayed trades, not trading as soon or as expediently as possible, the liquidity of assets. Okay, so that's something that we cannot do anything about, but it is a cost. Certain assets trade very quickly. You think of your large cap shares, you can buy and sell large amounts of that at any time. If you look at your small cap shares or your corporate bonds, you're dealing with very illiquid assets. You cannot sell any amount at will at any time, and those assets will have an impact on the performance of your transition or of the fund.
Which is presumably why you need someone who's actively involved in the market, such as a securities team.
Correct.
Jaco, just talking about what kind of funds transition management applies to. Is it all pension funds, or are we talking only about big segregated company pension funds?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of a spread of different funds out there that we have over the years have helped. Your larger pension fund are typically invest in segregated mandates, and we can definitely save them quite a bit of money when they do any restructuring. Smaller funds tend to invest in pooled products, or they pool their funds with other pension funds. In that case, it's usually also possible to add a lot of value or to save a lot of cost in doing a transition. Even smaller funds typically invest in unit trusts. Now there becomes a certain cut-off point depending upon the size being withdrawn. That will make it obvious whether it's helpful to do a transition management exercise or not. If you're just withdrawing 2 or 3 million, most unit trust companies will give you the funds right straight away, and you can straight away invest that again. So there's no need to go through a sophisticated transition process.
Well, Jaco, I'm sorry, but we'll have to leave it there. It's something perhaps to pick up on at a future date. Thank you very much for coming into the show. It's an interesting topic. That's Jaco Maritz. He's the head of the transition management team at Cadiz Securities, and that brings us to the program. Until next time, good night.